Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Josue Esquivel, and today we're presenting on the effects of impoverished neighborhoods on adolescents like myself and you guys is. So, to begin with, how many of you guys live in a poor income neighborhood? You get a raise of hands. Okay, that's pretty much every one of you, including you, Miss, because you're associated with us one way or another. So, what is an impoverished neighborhood? That was one of the main things that I wanted to find out. So first I went ahead and defined neighborhood, and it was by dictionary.com, and it said the area or region around or near some place or thing, vicinity. But is that really where you live? Do you just live in a region? What about like your teachers, peers, parents, cousins, neighbors, right? So that was very abstract. Then I went ahead and looked for a definition of impoverished, and it only said reduced to poverty. Well, what exactly is poverty? So I continued my process. And poverty was defined as the state of being extremely poor. Except that when someone thinks of poor, it's just money. But as you guys can see here, poverty is always connected to money. What about lack of knowledge or the lack of support, the lack of income, the lack of peers? Can that be poverty? So these were a couple of things that I realized during my research that affected teens and their development on the road to success. So they were race, income, family support, peer pressure, age, and gender. And these ultimately combined to create an effect on youth education and mental health. Now, I will be speaking of 3 different time eras to emphasize that even within different time periods, teens were always being affected no matter what. So first was the Reconstruction era in 1965, which consisted of the Jim Crow laws and the Ku Klux Klan. So the Emancipation Proclamation declared slaves free, right? They were free, but not equal. Individuals from the Ku Klux Klan and then laws known as Jim Crow laws segregated black individuals from whites. So on one side, you had a white community, on the other side, you had a black community. Now, they were separate but equal, according to Peggy versus Ferguson. So, picture this, there were 2 different societies, 2 different schools, but one had much better income, much better resources compared to the others. So as these teens began to develop and had children, they were already growing up with a less... Black individuals were already inferior to their white counterparts. There was also this one test done on teenagers and I don't know if you guys have been familiar. It's a test based with used with dolls. So there were a couple of children from black backgrounds. They were taken into this room, and a doctor had a white doll and a black doll. They were exactly the same. The only difference was their skin tone. Now, one of the most important questions that was asked was, which one is the cute and which one is the ugly doll? And the interesting part was that the black individuals, black teens, pointed at the black doll and said that was the ugly and the evil doll, and the white one was the cute and beautiful doll. So that itself demonstrates the innate self-contempt that they have for one another. They were born with that feeling of inferiority. Then I went ahead and studied the Industrial Revolution, which was during the 1760s to the mid-1800s. So it was the same time period, except that back the Jim Crow laws was the South, now we're ruling at the North. So as the Industrial Revolution began to develop, more and more technology began to rise. So minorities and former slaves began to move into the cities, and their white counterparts remained on the suburb areas. Now, here also, the ideals of society and what was important was damaged between the two. In the suburbs, the white individuals, because they were wealthy, education was one of their main priorities. In contrast to the white counterparts who were poor, all they cared about was supporting their families. So many children left their schools to be able to feed their families, and oftentimes the families didn't even spend time together. So that's where one of the main differences is present. Back in the suburbs, like in the farms, families were able to spend time with one another, in contrast to in the cities. So that itself was one of the main effects. Children weren't able to spend time together, grow from their parents, and get that encouragement to succeed on their education. And then I went ahead and studied the Great Depression, which was also mentioned by my partner, Luis Angel. So during the Great Depression, as you guys may know, there was extreme poverty. There were individuals resided in places known as Hoovervilles, named after the president during the Great Depression. And Hoovervilles are defined as a shanty town built by unemployed and destitute people during the Depression of the early 1930s. So during this time period, individuals were also harmed, both rich and poor. So as a result, one of the programs that was passed was the Federal Housing Administration. So this institute decided to help those individuals, saying, we're going to help all of you guys be able to pay for your homes, and we're going to secure your loans. There was one thing, though. Remember back here in the Industrial Revolution? Poor individuals lived in cities that were like pretty much beat up. In contrast to their white counterparts, they were in opulent places. So when this came along, the loans, many loans were denied to minorities and poor individuals because their homes were not convenient or were not they weren't profitable at all. So no loans were given. So they had to reside or find other ways to find a home. And then the white individuals, they were able to obtain the loans and continue their education and so on, and then develop more smart society, and then they had that advantage. So that's one of the things. And if you guys can see here, the nation in 2005 had a 47.4, so that's this percent. That's the share of poor residents in high poverty. But if you guys can see here in the cities, there was a 66.8 compared to the suburb, which is 31. That's more than half. And that's the reason why. So today, I was doing some research, and then on a study conducted by the American School Health Association, it was found that when studying girls, the quote states, neighborhood disadvantage operated through belief in conventional values, commitment to traditional goals, and psychological distress. So this is where gender roles come in place. Women are believed to be inferior when they were born, especially in minority or less educated communities. They still have that gender roles of women. You have to be compliant and you have to listen to what the man says. So this is where the disadvantage comes in. It's conventional, their commitment to the traditional. That's what their traditions are, and as a result, they're distressed. And then in boys, neighborhood disadvantage worked primarily through belief in conventional values. Same thing here. So the man had to be the one in charge and had to make the decisions. So they were oftentimes more involved in crimes. And then, as you guys can see in this little picture here, it says for the woman, it says she'll need to know her place. And for the guy, it says, and he better not cry. So where is a man supposed to show emotion or evoke their feelings if they're expected to be manly? And during a conversation with Mr. Hernandez, Ms. Dester's up, he said something that was actually very significant. He said, what if a student is having a horrible day at school, they're being bullied, right? And they go home, and all they're told is to shut up and suck it up. How do you express yourself? And this is oftentimes where peer pressure comes in place. So going back to caregivers, like parents, oftentimes they don't have parents, so they're known as caregivers, or it could be uncles. So caregivers also have a great impact on the success of a youth. For example, non-working. So youth with non-working caregivers have increased rates of depression, but are less likely to use marijuana compared to those that have working caregivers. Low parental education. So those that have parents that are not very well educated, they have high rates of major depression. And surprisingly, those that have parents that are not married or that do not have lived with a partner, they are less likely to report a major depression. So all in a nutshell, strong family structure is extremely important because if you share values with your family, you are encouraged to succeed, to follow an education. You receive emotional support, as I mentioned before, and there you get direction and guidance. In contrast to a weak family structure, there's little, if any, support at all. So oftentimes the student has to be self-reliant and independent, and then they don't know if they're making the right or wrong decision. This is the time when they they rely on their peers, and if they don't have that good peer mentality, I mean their peers aren't adequate enough, this could like affect their success. And as I mentioned before, peer pressure, race, and gender. Race, because oftentimes minorities are set aside, and they're innate, they're born with certain with a lack of resources. And gender, as I have said before, there was a lack of the gender roles plays a big place. So now solutions. Some of the solutions that I recommend are programs for teenagers in jails or that are yeah. So oftentimes in jails they don't receive enough support, emotional support. So what can be done is have programs that can provide that support for children. Also, even programs for children that are not in jail. If they don't have parents, as I mentioned before, that's a big deal. And then annual questionnaires, making sure that students, teens, are happy wherever they are, and if they're not, to be able to do that. And you guys may ask, well, how are you going to fund these programs? It's been proven that in jail, the government spends about the worth of a college tuition on each prisoner. So if this money can be used elsewhere for programs, that can be used to fund the individuals. And one more thing, I want to thank you guys for sitting here and getting an education, because by doing this, you're taking a step forward to obliterating this problem. Thank you.